Before this video starts, I know what you're probably thinking. Where's the Chapter 3 predictions? Toby just started a whole ARG, why aren't you talking about that? Firstly, everyone else has dissected that stuff already, so there's really not much to talk about, and secondly, I honestly just don't really care. The teasers we got were cool, but barely showed us anything we didn't already know was coming. The 3 new songs aren't bad, but they're basically just remixes of songs we already got, and songs which I personally think are better. And that ARG? Yeah, no. I think burnout is finally starting to kick in for the first time, hence the long break, so I'm taking a break from Deltarune stuff for a while. Honestly, it's better for all of us. Don't worry, Lightners vs Darkness is still being worked on. Here, take this small teaser clip. So anyway, this is gonna be a long one, so hope you're ready for some bad horror games. Okay, so I'm not even joking, I'm sitting here, working on my mystery game review, and I decide to take a break. There's this great YouTuber called AugustTheDuck who I watch a lot, and he has a second channel where he plays horror games. He just posted a new video at the time of writing this, and within the first 3 seconds, I could already tell what type of game it was. I'm not gonna spoil it just yet, but I immediately recognized the developer. What preceded was one of the most uninteresting horror games I've seen in a long time. The thing is, I've had this thought about the games from this developer for a while now, but for some reason everyone seemed to love these games. I really didn't understand what was so great about them. Anyway, as I just said, August played one of these games, and he perfectly expressed my opinion about them. Confusion and boredom, that basically summarizes it. So I stopped everything and decided I needed to talk about this, so here we are. Welcome to the official first full-length non-Deltarune Theory Gruffit video. First it was Tattletale, then it was that mystery game, and now it's this. Which will I finish first? Honestly, it's everyone's game at this point. So what's this about a bad horror game? That can't be true, right? There's no such thing as a bad horror game. Well, sorry to ruin Christmas for you, but there very much is. Horror games, even just indie games as a whole, have confused me for a long time. You have the occasional masterpiece like Undertale, Doki Doki, Tattletale, Granny, stuff like that, but in order for there to be a diamond in the rough, there has to be a lot of rough. Enter itch.io, the home of all fresh new indie games. Steam? What's that? A platform where you actually have to pay to upload your game? Who needs that garbage? And with that mindset in mind, thousands of young indie developers upload their Unity asset flips to itch.io every day in hopes of being noticed by Markiplier. Now obviously I'm over-exaggerating, and I want to make that very clear. I'm not saying that itch.io is full of nothing but garbage, there's a lot of great stuff you can find there. The problem is that nowadays, anyone can make a game, so naturally there's gonna be a lot of broken, unfinished tech demos that make it on there. Sometimes there are games which are actually pretty good, but get blasted way out of proportion by the internet. We've seen it happen time and time again. A small but relatively fun game gets absolutely massive until nobody can even hear the name without wanting to scream. Another big problem I've noticed is that most of these games never get any real criticism. I know we live in the age of Twitter, where anyone with a different opinion is seen as an active threat to your mental health, but criticism doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Criticism can actually be a good thing. It gives developers a chance to learn from their mistakes, and make an even better game next time. Nobody's first project is gonna be a masterpiece, whether that be a game or a theory, there are plenty of ways you can screw things up. But through friendly, constructive criticism, we learn of those mistakes, and make sure to never make them again. Now, especially in the recent year or so, I've seen a lot of meh horror games appearing left, right and center. Most of them aren't necessarily bad, but they're also no Tattletale. I believe a lot of these developers have a lot of talent, and if they continue working, they can make something even better one day. Once again, the problem is how much the internet overhyped these games. You got MatPat making theories, you got Jacksepticeye calling it the scariest game ever made. Once you've achieved that, what's left to improve? These developers may not feel like they need to improve at all if the legendary Mr. Game Theory himself already made a video about their game. So today I plan to change that. I want to take a look at some of these games, and actually give them real criticism. Now I don't want to look like a jerk, so I'm gonna combine my criticism with some things I liked about the game. As I said, most of these developers have a lot of potential. Most of them just lack originality, which almost everyone does with their first project, so that's kind of a given. So without any further rambling, let's look at 3 overrated horror games and give them constructive criticism. Oh yeah, before we do that. This is a YouTube video after all, so obviously I'm gonna over-exaggerate at some points. So to solve this issue, I've come up with this criticism structure. First I'll say what I like about the game, then I'll over-exaggerate my criticism for comedic effect, and then I'll actually present my criticism. Now that I've said this, you have no right to yell at me in the comments.
Deep down, very deep down, very deep down, very deep down, where the deep down, very deep down, where the deep down, deep down.
Iron Lung is a game that exists. If you've had internet access for the last 8 months, you've definitely heard of this thing before. Whether that's a good thing or not is up to you. But hey, maybe it's not so bad, so what's the game actually about? Decades ago, every known star and habitable planet vanished, leaving only those who were on space stations or starships. This event became known as the Quiet Rapture. With supplies dwindling and infrastructure crumbling, survivors are searching for any trace of natural resources in a universe of barren moons, lit by the ghost light of vanished stars. One such moon holds a strange anomaly, an ocean of blood. You are a convict, tasked with exploring this anomaly, in a makeshift submarine nicknamed the Iron Lung. It was not designed for this depth, so you will be welded inside and the forward window will be closed. There was no time for training. If successful, you earn your freedom. Now I'll give the game this, the actual story is pretty well written. The scenario is definitely a first. Not many horror games take place in space, especially not on a moon. Blood Ocean sounds cool, I'm sure you could do a lot with that if executed well. Overall, the atmosphere of this game isn't too bad. In terms of gameplay, you're put in this small submarine, only able to move forwards, backwards, and rotate. You have no visual on where you are, only given a map and a pair of coordinates. And that's basically it. You have to travel to these points of interest and take photos of them. Sounds pretty cool, so why did I put this game on this list? Well, there's one major issue I have with this game, and it's that the game itself is so unbelievably boring. So you're trapped in this tiny sardine can, with your only way of moving being these 2 buttons. The entirety of the gameplay consists of you pressing these 4 buttons over and over, occasionally glancing at your map whilst the growl.mp3 pretends to scare you every once in a while. You push buttons, run to the back, push another button, run back, and do it all again. Pushing buttons on a washing machine sounds like more fun, you'd get the same experience. People call Bendy a glorified walking simulator, but this gets a standing ovation. It's a literal standing simulator, so I guess it fits. I tried watching 3 people play this game in the past, and in all 3 scenarios, I either fell asleep or ended up clicking on another video. How Markiplier got almost 50 minutes of content out of this thing is beyond me. Now some might claim it's unfair of me to judge a game without playing it myself first. Listen, most indie games have a lot in common, one of these things being a lack of replay value. Once you've seen someone play it, you've seen it all. I am not spending $6 to fall asleep to a game I can watch others play for free. I did want to give this game a fair shot, so before writing this game, I finally sat through one of these playthroughs, and yup, I didn't miss a thing. Everything played out exactly how I thought it would. Now I never saw the ending to this game, but just from this singular thumbnail, I already guessed what it was going to be. Some big anglerfish thing would bust through the sub and eat you. I made that prediction before I even saw the game's menu for the first time. Now while I never finished a full playthrough of the game, I did watch this great video by FETV who brings the camera out of the submarine to show how the game works. The video ended with a reveal of the ending jump scare, and you wouldn't guess what it was.
Well, let's take a look.
Horror games are the most predictable things ever. This should go without saying, but if you can guess a game's ending before even seeing its goddamn menu screen, then there's no point in playing it, or even watching someone else play it. Also, this might be a nitpick, but you really couldn't even model the monster's head? I decided to see how the jump scare actually looks like in-game, and I honestly didn't expect how bad it looks. Look at the jump scare once, then at 0.25 speed.
295 confirmed beautifully. Oh! Confirmed beautifully.
I don't even think I had to slow that down for you to get my point. The jump scare is a literal pancake moving on the y-axis. Now I'm not one to judge a game's jump scares, since that's not how jump scares work, but keep in mind there are people who call Five Nights at Freddy's lazy for having PNGs zooming in on the camera. So if you think this is a bad jump scare, you must agree this is objectively worse. But hey, who really cares about gameplay anymore, right? It has PS2 graphics, so that means it must be good, right? Maybe the ending can save it. Oh yeah, you just get eaten. Hot take coming up, but I absolutely hate it when horror games end by killing the player. It's just a boring and unsatisfying ending. You know how everyone seems to agree that it was all just a dream ending is the worst way to end a game? Yeah, no, killing the player is by far worse. In a dream ending, at least the character you've been playing as this entire time survives. By killing the player, you've literally made the entire game a huge waste of time. There are certain times where killing the player does work, but very rarely. So many horror games do this now. They actually show some potential, and then they ruin it all by killing the player to get that epic monster reveal shot for everyone's thumbnails. In the case of Iron Lung, what's stopping me from simply ramming this submarine into a wall? It's literally the exact same end result. The submarine ends up destroyed, I end up dead, and none of the photos taken get recovered. I don't care if it makes me jump for a second or two, this lazy ending somehow made this boring game even more pointless. I just don't understand why people love this junk so much. It's not fun to play, there's barely any tension, and the ending makes the whole thing a giant waste of time. I'd rather play Cyberpunk on release day, at least there'd be something to actually do. So the gameplay is non-existent, but at least the story is good, right? Well, kinda. Actually scrap that, no, the story sucks as well. If you were too lazy to read that wall of text at the start, let me briefly summarize. So basically, Earth is dead, the universe is dead, all humans are dead, all planets are dead, all life is dead, everything is just dead. That's the whole story. You play as a convict for some weird reason. If only a handful of humans remained, I don't think crime would be a big priority. So some higher-ups send you down there in exchange for your freedom. So at least you have a motive, an extremely weak one. On your submarine, there's a note which basically just reinforces my idea that this whole thing is pointless. Apparently nobody expects you to actually make it out alive, since this is an execution, not an exhibition. Even if you do make it out, they'll just kill you anyway. And even if you do somehow escape them, where would you go? The entire goddamn universe is dead, there's literally nowhere. What a great way to get me invested in your universe, developer, really motivates me to waste 30 minutes of my time. This game has gotten so huge, that even Pyrocynical made a video talking about how great it is. Lovely. According to him, a good horror game leaves an impact on you. Even hours after playing, it still makes you think about it, and makes you think about our real world. Now I don't know about you, but I didn't walk away from this game with my sixth eye opened. I walked away from this game miserable and with mild dementia. Now it's worth mentioning that a few months ago, the game apparently got a lore update. I'm guessing this is supposed to add a bit more to the universe considering how vague it was at first. However, this lore update is not what got people talking about this game. The original, vague title is what caught everyone's eye. As a result, I've purposefully stayed blind to this lore update so hindsight wouldn't become an issue. This unclear depiction of the game's story is what made Pyrocynical make that video. You could argue that the story is kept ambiguous on purpose, but the little details we are told are expressed in such a nihilistic way that there's really no reason to get invested. I genuinely can't think of a single other game whose lore I care less about. I care more about the Friday Night Funkin' lore, a game whose name already makes my skin crawl. So is there anything good I can say about the game at all? Well, for what it's worth, I think this concept could work, but not as a game. Some people often forget there's more than one medium of storytelling. Horror doesn't just exist on itch.io, it also exists in the form of movies and TV shows. Personally, I feel like if Iron Lung was turned into a movie, it would have been substantially better. Iron Lung's biggest flaw is the fact that there's no gameplay. This concept simply doesn't work as a game, since there's nothing to do. Five Nights at Freddy's is a great example of this. The first game also restricted the player from moving, giving them nothing more than a few buttons to push. Fundamentally, the two games are the same. Both games suffer from the fact that the gameplay just isn't fun. There's barely anything to do, which results in less incentive to finish the game. Five Nights at Freddy's fixed this in later games by adding more game mechanics such as the music box. However, fan-made creations like the musical made by Random Encounters show that the Five Nights formula works surprisingly well in movie form. I feel like Iron Lung would be very similar. There are plenty of great movies which take place almost entirely in one small room, and yet still manage to be entertaining, and at the same time terrifying. For example, the masterpiece known as The Cube. A simple but terrifying concept represented almost entirely in a single set piece. Even though the characters technically move between rooms, they all look the same except for lighting, adding to that feeling of being trapped in an endless maze with no way out. Another great example is the Spanish Netflix exclusive, The Platform, or as it's called in Spanish, El Hoyo, which actually translates to the hole. Once again a fantastic and equally horrific film about capitalism and the class system, where a giant platform of food is lowered every day to feed prisoners, with the ones at the top eating first while the ones at the bottom of the literal food chain fight for the scraps. But of course that never happens, because if there's one thing I know about humans, it's that they're always so friendly and love sharing their food. Now this is a film that opens your sixth eye. A brilliantly portrayed message done so almost entirely in this tiny room. Both of these movies worked great, but would almost certainly have failed if they were video games instead. The Platform would absolutely flop since most of the film relies on dialogue between characters. The Cube did kind of work in game form, depicted in the multiplayer game Half Dead, but even then it mainly ended up just being a first-person minesweeper. So to summarize, the main problem I have with this game is the fact that it's a game. The concept it presented, while definitely not for me, would have worked far better as a horror movie. Some might disagree since one of Iron Lung's main points is that you can't see anything. In that case, it still could have worked as a book. The developer clearly joined the literature club in high school, so I'm sure that would have turned out great. What's my final verdict? Well, I don't hate this game. I don't think it's necessarily terrible, despite its glaring flaws. Is it overrated? Absolutely, but that doesn't mean the developer doesn't have potential. They recently released another game called Gloomwood, which I haven't played yet but it looks really good. Sadly I don't think much will come of this game, since everyone will just know the developer as the Iron Lung guy. Anyway, 4.5 pages in and I'm still talking about the first game, so let's move on.
Say Be quiet! I thought you said to say that I did, but I didn't tell you to say
This is an interesting case since this section isn't about a singular game, but more so a certain developer. Around 3 to 4 months ago, you probably saw this face absolutely everywhere in your recommendations. This man is in fact the Man from the Window, a small short horror experience about, you guessed it, a man from the window. The premise is simple. You play as this interestingly detailed rabbit lady coming home from work. Your son runs up to you telling you about the man from the window, holding up a book you've never seen before. Inside the book is a short story about a man looking for a friend, and once he starts tapping on your window, you know who his next friend will be. Your goal is simple: stall exactly 5 in-game minutes until he leaves. You do this by setting up barricades, and making sure to hide in places he'll check last. How do you do this? Well, simple, the book literally tells you the order in which he'll check. The exact order is kind of pointless, since all you need to pay attention to are the last 2 locations listed. These are the locations in which you and Junior need to hide. If you set everything up right, he'll run out of time before checking these locations. There are 5 hiding spots: the table, the fridge, the sink, the bed, and the bathtub. You can stall for time by blocking the door with the couch, and by opening the donut box, each stalling the man for 1 minute each. You can also lock all 3 doors, each giving an extra 30 seconds. The man spends 1 minute checking each hiding spot. Do the math, and that's exactly 5 minutes before he checks the spots you're hiding in. So when you think about it, beating the game is incredibly easy. All you need to do is move the couch, open the donut box, hide Junior in one of the last 2 locations in the book, lock all 3 doors, and hide in the other last location. Keep in mind that if you or Junior needs to hide in the bedroom or bathroom, only lock the door after entering. Once you understand how the game works, there's no challenge or horror aspect at all. The quote-unquote scary part of the game comes from not knowing where the man will check. Once you realize the book tells you that, there's no horror element in the slightest. The problem is that the game gives you the option to skip the opening cutscene, which makes you read the book. After dying once, most players will just skip the cutscene every time, never realizing the book is the answer. Now you can always check the book again in your inventory, but guess what? The game never even tells you that you have an inventory. Unless you check your settings or just randomly press tab, you'd never realize that. This also makes it impossible to win, since you need to select your keys through the inventory. As a result, this entire game boils down to nothing more than boring trial and error. If you don't know how the game works, it's literally impossible to win. If you do know how the game works, there's nothing scary or challenging about it. It's not very well balanced, and honestly I can't see why so many people obsess over this thing. Now, bad horror games that get an insane amount of attention are nothing new, they're a dime in a dozen. And if it ended there, this game would be no exception. However, the developers somehow managed to release 3 more almost identical games within the span of the last 4 months. Honestly, it felt like more than that, but still. Each of these games follows the same formula as the Window Man one, but takes place in a different setting, with slightly altered gameplay mechanics. Beware the Shadow Catcher is by far the best one out of these games. It centers around these 2 trying to keep their diner open, the classic money struggle. One night, they're visited by 3 shadow people, their first customers in a long time. They want to eat there, but warn the ladies about the Shadow Catcher, a creature who doesn't like it when shadows visit the normal world. Your objective is simple: take the 3 orders, prepare them and serve them. The challenge lies in the Shadow Catcher randomly appearing at the front door. If he sees either of the ladies, it's game over. Now the Shadow Catcher can be slightly seen walking towards the door, forcing the player to constantly run over there to check. Not gonna lie, so far this looks pretty good. The game has some genuinely fun gameplay by giving you a recipe book and a bunch of ingredients to use. However, the game once again fails to tell you that you can switch characters by pressing tab. Each lady has a different job. Maud prepares the food while Sam serves it to the customers. Now the majority of the kitchen is exposed to the front door. I like that not all of the kitchen is, meaning not all parts of preparing food involve risk. It adds some variety, and even some strategy, letting the player prioritize more risky stuff just after the Shadow Catcher left. There's also a brief moment of tension while the shadow people eat, hoping you didn't screw up their order. The game has 3 nights, the last night adding an extra challenge by making the Shadow Catcher enter from the side as well. What's this? A horror game that actually increases in difficulty over nights? That's unheard of. Anyway, compared to the last game, this one is a massive improvement. The gameplay actually exists, the story is pretty interesting, and for once, the game is actually pretty scary at times. There's a nice difficulty balance which not many games have. I was very surprised by this game, I didn't expect it to be so good. So did the developer continue this trend of relatively well-made horror games? Well. The Vermander Curse is another game made by this guy. It's about demons in a hospital or something, I can't remember. I'll be honest, this game kinda slipped my memory. I didn't finish watching anyone play it since it didn't seem that interesting. I would research it more for this script, but for the sake of time, I'll skip this one. Midnight Made Night is where the fun really starts. Remember that game I mentioned in the intro? The one that I instantly knew the developer of? Yeah, this is that game. I watched August play it, and my god is it horrible. If you're wondering just how bad, August's reaction here really says it all.
Oh, why my cockroach?
So you play as these two nocturnal maids that have to pack up everything in this haunted mansion. Pick up a box, click on stuff to pick it up, bring boxes back to the van. That's the entire game, a literal clicker game. It doesn't take long for the maids to be greeted by a spirit, Mr. Reddit himself.
Terribly sorry about the fright, madam, tips Fedora.
Telling the maids about his father, he tells them to hide in hidden wall spaces when the candles turn blue. Now this wouldn't be an awful game mechanic, if you weren't required to look away from the candles every time you pick up a goddamn item. Considering just how many goddamn tiny things there are to pick up, this just becomes annoying. The game also doesn't tell you how much space is left in the box you're carrying. This means you could be on the other side of the house, a few items away from finishing the room, only to find out you've run out of space. Occasionally Fedora Man comes back and slows down progression even more by telling you lore no one cares about. His dad was bad, killed a bunch of people including his son's fiancée, and now her spirit also haunts the mansion. And before you ask, yes, of course the Fedora Man is engaged to a fox. She's even easier to avoid, just look at her and she runs away. Anyway, hours of painful repetitive clicking later, the game finally ends with the Fedora guy confronting his father. This causes his dead fox fiancée to reveal she never forgot him, she just gave him the silent treatment because she didn't want him to be a wimp. Just as you think things can't get any weirder, this happens.
Now come on, let's finally leave this place behind. Yes, we must depart at once. You wouldn't dare. Wanna bet, old man? What the actual f*** am I playing?
And to top it all off, the father's old butler, who I'm certain is a Sense ripoff, sends him straight to hell. And just like that, the game ends. I was genuinely speechless the first time I saw this, and so was August. So, just like August, I'm not even gonna try to say anything, I'm just gonna move on. As you've probably noticed by now, most of these games have a lot in common, but the developer actually made a game before The Man in the Window. While not extremely different, this game was definitely the most unique out of all of them. But this game actually proves my point. The Man in the Window is what got this developer noticed. The formula worked, so they just kept recycling the same idea over and over. This is what I think happened. The Man from the Window blew up, therefore the developer used that game as a blueprint for all future games. However, The Man from the Window has some serious problems with it, resulting in the developer essentially making these problems their style. Now you can turn issues into your style, but that doesn't mean they're not issues anymore. Because of the lack of criticism these games receive, because it's itch.io we're talking about here, the developer never realized what elements of the Window Man game were flaws, and which got everyone's attention. There has also been some speculation about the unique character design in these games. Because of certain, attention to detail, many believe that these games are simply a way for the developer to live out some weird fetish. Now while that may sound absurd, after you realize almost every single female character in these games is particularly gifted in the chest and back regions, it doesn't sound too crazy anymore. In all seriousness, I don't think this developer has bad intentions. As the endings to these games show, the developer probably doesn't take these games too seriously. They even directly admitted there were certain issues with that last game, so there is a hint of self-awareness here. They seem to be a pretty nice person from the replies that I've read, so I don't think these games have a deeper meaning to them. The way I see it, they're just an indie developer who blew up on YouTube, and are now trying to make the most of this hype train while it lasts. Bet you didn't see this one coming. Now I was gonna include the mortuary assistant in this list instead, considering I genuinely have no clue how that thing gained attention in the slightest, but since the full game recently released, I feel like this corpse is a bit too early for my Raven claws to dig into. So instead, I decided to go with a much safer target to laugh at, Poppy Playtime, the biggest gaming laughingstock since Battlefield 2042. Poppy Playtime is a horror game released last year, and at the time of writing this, is 10 days away from its first birthday. Let's see if I can finish this video before then. Now at this point, this game has been talked about so much that I don't even think it's worth trying to explain what it is anymore. Toy company, people go missing, you go find them, big fur ball, you get the point. The most generic and uncreative story aside, this game has had quite a few controversies over its time. Now I'm not gonna get into all the Ecra Coaster or NFT garbage, since I think we're all sick of hearing about that stuff by now, so just know it was bad. What caught me really off guard was the team working on this thing, Enchanted Mob. If you remember 2015, you probably remember the name Enchanted Mob. They were an animation channel that mainly did Minecraft Five Nights at Freddy's stuff, and dare I say it, I used to be a fan. Those Undertale animations they made were amazing. Regardless how talented they were, I can safely say their reputation hasn't stayed with the times. As of today, the channel Enchanted Mob is merely a shell of what it used to be, if even that, but we'll get back to that later. For now, let's analyze the actual game. More specifically, through a completely unbiased view. It's easy to hate the game now simply for existing, that's how bad the controversies have gotten. But unlike most people, I actually have a reason for disliking this game so heavily. The plot of the game is very simple to understand. There's this big toy factory called Playtime Co. who specializes in making excellent toys, their star attraction being a talking doll called Poppy. Apparently Poppy is just like a real girl, a phrase which they will quite literally beat you over the head with multiple times.
Poppy's as lovable as a real girl. Just like a real girl, Poppy always wants to look her best. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Poppy?
I'm a real girl, just like you.
At least the game clarifies its target audience right off the bat. You play as a former employee of the company who returns there after receiving a letter from other employees who apparently disappeared. After arriving, you arm yourself with the company grab pack, watch an unskippable instructional video, and start heading deeper in. You quickly run into Huggy Wuggy, a monster with the single most laziest design I have ever seen. This is such a blatant Cookie Monster ripoff this isn't even funny anymore. After some boring gameplay and non-scary spooks from Huggy, you finally get chased down by him directly. Now most people who played the game say this chase sequence was the best part. I personally don't see it, but sure. Not like the rest of the game is much better. You pull a box down, Huggy goes bye-bye, you find Poppy, blah 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 the end. If you were hoping for a rundown of Chapter 2 as well, prepare to be disappointed. All the way back when I first discovered this game, there was one very large problem I had with it, a problem which still exists to this day. The game is way too similar to Bendy and the Ink Machine. In both games, you play as a former employee of a children's entertainment company because of a letter. You look around for a bit, turn some big machine on, immediately after get chased down by the main monster thing, fall down somewhere, and end on some dramatic cliffhanger. There's also the fact that you find multiple tapes around the place, some of which sound exactly like characters from Bendy.
Rich, where are they keeping the Huggy boxes?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Remember when maintenance left it a sweep of this place?
No.
Exactly. Nobody in this stupid company knows what they're doing. I get it. It's a nice program and all on brand, but it's just hard to be happy about it when manufacturing's on our necks about it, because we can't fight stupid Augie boxes.
It's dark and it's cold, and it's stuck in behind every single wall. In some places, I swear this conversing ink is clear up to my knees. You can bet I won't be doing any more repair jobs for Mr. Joey Drew.
Overall, Poppy Playtime seemed like a lazy fangame at best and a greedy ripoff at worst. That's the stance I had last October, and that's the stance I still have to this day. Even with Chapter 2 releasing, my feelings haven't changed much. Despite all the people who work on this game that actually care about it, it feels like the actual creators of the game have no passion in the slightest. Let me explain. Looking back at characters from Bendy, there's one thing they all have in common, a continuous theme shared across all characters. That theme is religion. Bendy is constantly referred to as the Ink Demon. Other phrases such as Little Devil Darling and the Dancing Demon also back this up. Alice Angel is pretty obvious. Boris is quite literally a wolf in sheep's clothing, with sheep having an important biblical meaning, commonly used to refer to the people of God. Sammy may not be a cartoon character, but he is by every definition a worshipper of Bendy. Sammy is by far the most religious character in the game, referring to Bendy as his savior, and even trying to sacrifice Henry to him. See what I mean? As different as all four of these characters are, they all share a connection, that connection being their link to religion. They aren't just random characters the developers threw in, they actually had thought put into their creation. Bendy's downfall was because of multiple reasons, but I don't think it's a coincidence that it started with Chapter 3. At that point, new characters were being added that didn't share this connection. Bertram Piedmont, the projectionist, these characters don't have that religious connection that the others do. I think this small but important detail inadvertently resulted in these characters being less liked by fans. So at least for its original cast of characters, Bendy characters had a continuous theme that they all followed. What theme do Poppy Playtime characters share? Well, they're all toys. Yeah, that's about it. None of the characters share any kind of connection between them other than the fact that they're all toys. Sure, that's technically a connection, but it's such a thin one that it shouldn't even count. Taking one simple glance at the name of some of these characters is more than enough proof to show these people didn't give a second thought about them. I'm sorry, but when you have names like Cat Bee, Candy Cat, Boogiebot, and of course, the legendary Sir Poops-a-Lot, it's very obvious why these characters were created. One word, merch. For some reason people had an issue with Bendy including a toy store area just to promote their merch. Completely ignore the fact that this was in the 3rd chapter, halfway through the game. The very first location in Poppy Playtime you explore is a toy shop. The comparison just can't be made. So all of the characters in this game are just lazy excuses to make merch, doesn't mean the whole game is, right? If only that were true. In typical greedy game dev fashion, the game copies a lot more than just Bendy. It utilizes the classic human souls bringing toys to life trope, a trope I'm sure we all want to forget by now, and the menu music is literally just some crappy knockoff of It's Just a Burning Memory. The game even starts with a VHS tape, how much more obvious can you get? Every single element of this game was carefully crafted to include every single modern horror trend. You got VHS, you got funny amnesia music, you got Five Nights at Freddy's plot structure. It's like the developers looked at every recent successful horror trend, took what made them successful, and combined them to make this abomination. I know there are some passionate workers on the team, but I just can't help but see the word corporate written all over this thing. Oh yeah, speaking of the developers, what saints they are. Now, like I said earlier, I'm not gonna sit here and bore you with the NFT and Ecker Coaster stuff, since that's stuff everyone knows by now. Instead, I wanna focus on another weird controversy Enchanted Mob was in a few years ago. So many of us probably remember some of the Minecraft Five Nights at Freddy's animations Enchanted Mob used to make. More specifically, animations that involved Circus Baby. Circus Baby is a character that was first introduced in Sister Location. What weirded people out was the fact that Enchanted Mob animated her in strangely suggestive ways. In other words, they were accused of sexualizing this character. Now, sexualizing video game characters for views is nothing new, happens every day, so what made this case so different? Circus Baby, in the game, is possessed by the soul of Elizabeth Afton, who at the time, is 14 years old. I think you catch my drift. So how could they possibly make this situation any worse? Well, after these accusations were being made, Enchanted Mob gave the most Twitter response I've seen in my life. According to them, this wasn't an issue, because Sister Location was released 4 years ago. Using real-life time, that would make Elizabeth 18. I have never heard more Reddit moderator logic ever. A real human being not only wrote that, but decided it was a good idea to post that, as their official response. Now they did apologize for this, which I commend them for, but still, not the best look. Regardless, my overall opinion of Poppy Playtime is still very negative. The developers are extremely shady and aren't even trying to be subtle about it anymore, but even discarding that, the game just isn't fun. The gameplay is boring, the most interesting part is at the very beginning when you swing over a goddamn hole. The characters are extremely generic, bland, and just not scary. During Mommy Longlegs' introduction, she tries to give this intimidating monologue. Listening to it, I genuinely became concerned. Not because it scared me, but because it didn't. I thought the dialogue she said was decent, but her appearance just makes her so unintimidating. Kermit the Frog could have struck more fear into my soul with that monologue. My point is, the characters in Poppy Playtime lean far too heavily on the toy side. When it came to Bendy, the characters were still pretty generic kid material, but they also leaned heavily on the horror side, mainly with their appearances. When Alice Angel first makes her appearance in Chapter 3, that was brilliantly portrayed.
Oh my god!
A great subversion of expectations. The overall dark and gloomy art style of the game also helps with this tremendously. Poppy Playtime doesn't have a scary art style, or scary character models. While Bendy was an even split, Poppy didn't even try to make their characters look or act scary, relying entirely on the dialogue and animations. The only thing remotely scary about Huggy is his crawl animation, an animation you definitely saw because they literally force you to see it so you can get your YouTube thumbnail. Regardless, even if he had a more scary appearance, he still wouldn't scare me simply because of his name alone. Poppy Playtime is a massive rabbit hole which I could make several videos about, so I think I'm gonna end it there. I might come back to this dumpster fire excuse of a game when the next chapter comes out so I can laugh at it some more, but for now, I think I'm done. So, what have we learned today? Horror is dead. Standards really don't exist anymore. None of these games were necessarily brain-meltingly terrible, they're just extremely overrated. Now I was gonna include a section talking about a horror game I actually think is really good, the perfect indie horror game if you will, but this script is already on its 11th page, so I think I'll save that game for its own separate video. Besides, I made my own. That's right, I made an entire horror game just for this video. Well, if you can even call it a game. It's like 3 minutes long at best, and I highly doubt anyone will actually be scared by it. Why is that? Because the AI is really dumb. It's not programmed to chase you, so it's really not a threat. In case you couldn't tell yet, yes, this is a parody horror game. I followed every cliché in the book. Broken game mechanics, no replay value, non-existent AI, over-the-top trailer, I even left cryptic binary messages. Sadly it seems most people missed the joke, but still. Regardless, hope this horror theme interests you, because I have a few more ideas. As I said at the start, I'm taking a break from Deltarune. The teasers really didn't tell us that much, and to be honest, I just don't like ARGs. I want to, but the internet kinda ruined them for me. I'll leave that stuff to half-bred chaos, gotta give the competition a chance to catch up after all. Next video will probably be a ranking video, one which I'm actually pretty excited about making. Other than that, I think that's about it. Oh yeah, I should probably mention. I made a second channel. I don't want recreation stuff to flood this one, so I'm gonna start posting those over there now. One last thing, you're probably wondering how that mystery game script is coming along, right? Well, I'm putting that one on the back burner. I've decided, if I'm gonna be a pyrocynical clone, this game will be my pet's cope too. The real reason is simple. Unlike most games I plan to talk about, this is a game I genuinely want to help succeed. I really think this game has potential to be the next Undertale, all it needs now is attention. Because of that, I think I'll wait with my review. Not only does that mean the video will be better quality, with more editing history, but it also means I'll have a larger audience that will see it. Other than that, I don't have much to say. Well, see ya.
Objection!